Hey, 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 what is going on, guys? Welcome aboard. Welcome to another Thursday special with the Blu-XPerience with my man Blue Games and
What
our
up?
special guest today. That's going to be on you. But before we even introduce our special guest, let me just say that I'm going to get right into it because there's so much to talk about on today's show. I'm so excited to have this guest on way before I even started streaming on YouTube, and I was just a regular simmer. I was watching this gentleman fly on back in my watching Twitch days, where Twitch is what I only watched. That was my nightly entertainment before I went to bed was Twitch, and this gentleman taught me a lot about just presentation, the planes, teaching, learning, and without further ado, let's introduce the man himself, Mr. BlackBox711. Blackbox, how you doing, man? Welcome aboard.
Hello everyone. Yeah, thank you so much for the invitation. Happy to be here.
Oh, absolutely glad to have you on board, man. I appreciate it. I know it took a while because right now, let me just tell you guys, the gentleman is staying up. It's what, 2 a.m. Where he is in Germany. So he's like way beyond his bedtime, but he decided to grace us over here in the US with his presence on the show and just talk about as much as we want to talk about today, man. But Blue, how you doing, bro?
I'm
Welcome.
doing good, man. I'm excited as well about having Black Box on the show. It's I guess it's been a long time coming, and it's just always great to sit in the presence of one of the OGs of flight simming and aviation in general. I mean, this guy has so much experience, and I know we're gonna talk more about that here in a second. But yeah, thanks. Welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, happy to also take in the questions from the chats.
Absolutely.
There you go. He's a big time streamer, so he can read chat, multitask, and answer questions at the same time, which is
And
good.
fly a plane at the same time.
That's true.
Yeah, I don't know how I do it. No, so.
I know. I know. Wow, wow, wow. So Black Box, welcome to the show, man. Again, so many questions. I'm trying to figure out where to start here, but I just happened to bump on your YouTube channel. This is the YouTube side of things, and I found your first video on YouTube, I think,
Oh boy.
5 years ago.
Yeah, pretty much almost 5.5 now. Yeah, correct.
Wow. So it's been about 5.5 years for you. This was what, a FSLabs A320X Basic
Yeah,
FMA mode. Wow.
yeah.
So have you, well, based on your streams that I've watched, and I know a lot of people have watched it, have you been always teaching doing your streams, or how did you get into the whole streaming deal? Let me ask you that.
Yeah. So back in, well, I always talked to you guys prior to the stream regarding a history regarding flight simming. So for myself, going back to the beginning of my real world training, really in 1990, I remember that I was using the first flight sim, Microsoft something, in 1992, practicing holding patterns back then. And so the fascination was right there, right from the start. And even though there were some periods where I didn't touch flight sims, the moment came when I heard FSLabs announce that they are bringing out a proper A320 flight sim, which kind of caught my attention because at that time I was rated on the A320, which I still am to date. But I was kind of thinking, okay, that's kind of a big word to say, extremely realistic A320 flight sim. So I was intrigued, and when it came out and it was finally released, I was kind of thinking, all right, so let's see what it brings to the table. And I was actually fascinated by how detailed it was modeled. I've never seen anything prior to that, in that kind of depth. And that kind of gave me the inspiration to really think, hey, you know what? If it's that good, if I can actually show people that are, sharing the same passion for flight simming, if I can actually kind of show them how to use these systems, because I mean, A320 is a complicated machine. It does a lot of things automatically, but to get it to do these things automatically, you have to put a lot of data into these computers. And I thought, well, yeah, I might as well just, do a couple of videos to kind of, share my kind of fascination with those that share the same passion. And that's when those videos started to come out pretty regularly. And yeah, at some point, I remember that someone was telling me, "Hey, do you know Twitch?" And I'm like, Yeah, it's this gaming kind of streaming platform, correct? Because my daughters were actually, well, at least my younger daughter was actually watching someone, play games on Twitch, and so she told me about it, but I never thought, actually of actually using it myself. But then some people came up and say, hey, how about you do some live streams? Because that way you can actually interact with people in real time and they can ask you questions and you can show them. And I thought, well, you know what? That's a great idea. And so, yeah, I already had the name BlackBox711. I never thought about actually streaming myself, but that's, the channel that I had. And yeah, it all went from there. And I remember that it was, such a buzz actually, streaming and having these interactions with these fellow flight simmers. And yeah, that's how it went.
Jeez. And
So
then
I was gonna say, what like I mean, what year was this? What, 2015 or so when you started getting into Twitch?
5.5 years, so 17. No, actually, no, 16. 2016. Yeah, that's when I went
And
into
I
Twitch.
mean, you have. I mean, let's just kind of give you some. I mean, if you guys don't know who Black Box is, this is he has over 25 years of real world aviation experience. Rated in the 737, the 747, 320
Yeah,
family. Is that correct?
yeah, that's correct.
So with all that like knowledge and experience in the real world, and I mean, I don't know what the situation was back then and at this time with flight simmers and streamers of flight sim, but like, what excited you so much about the FSLabs, about simming? You're a real world pilot. Like, you get the real thing. Like, it doesn't get any better than that. What excites you to come home and then hop on the sim? And then on the other hand, how was it accepted by the audience of 2016?
Well, that was really the key. It was just it's a big excitement about having a flight sim actually promising so much and actually delivering, which back then wasn't really happening too often. And so it was the fact that I could actually get myself immersed into these flight sims or into the A320, to a level that I found just fascinating, and it didn't bore me on any level. Quite the contrary. And it's just the interaction again. If I could just simply fly from A to B and not talk to anyone, and people watch, that would be one way of doing it. But actually having people to come in and say, hey, can you explain this and this, or why does this button blink, or what does this do? And so I kind of found my passion also for teaching, right, in that regard. And actually, some people already asked me, why am I a real world training captain, which I'm not. I've been asked several times if I want to, do that, but the problem is I don't live at my home base, so I actually
Mm.
commute, which takes by train 4 hours, car also 4 hours.
wow.
And if I'm lucky, I get a flight from Bremen, where I live, down to Frankfurt. And it would have meant actually moving to Frankfurt. And my wife, actually, she was born and raised in Bremen, and I didn't want to. Well, we already tried at the very first beginning when I got my contract in 1995 at my airline, to kind of get used to the Frankfurt area, but my wife wasn't really happy, and so we moved back to Bremen. Yeah, but that's why I kind of declined my offer or chance to become a training captain. So now, actually, through streaming and actually, being able to teach people on any level, about the A320, that's really what kept me going and kept that fire.
Wow.
No, that's awesome because you sure riveted me enough when you were explaining the different things, even though I was never an Airbus guy. I was like, nah, it's Boeing all the way. 737, what's
I
this
know.
Airbus thing, But
When I,
starting,
yeah.
yeah, when you start to explain the different things that airplane could do, it's just like, wow, your eyes open wide, and then you had the knack for, as you said, teaching. So you've taught it well. I can tell you from the reaction and the audience that you have had and kept, by the way, because I remember you calling out certain names during your stream when you interact with the stream. You still do it today, by the way.
Mm,
Is it Munkin? It's a bunch of different people that stuck with you. How, like
yeah.
your fans or the people who watch you, how long have they been with you in chat? Can you name some that, or not even name some, but have you realized that some people have been there since day one with you?
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty much, I would say, 80%, 90% of my my viewers have been with me for a long, long time. which is fantastic. That's a great compliment to have these people still after such a long time, still come in and interact and share the passion. Can I just answer one of the questions that I've just seen in chat?
Yeah, go ahead.
So from Captain Hack, he asked, how long have you been flying for? So I know people always kind of ask me that question regularly, and I'm like, well, I've started my training in 1990. That's
Wow,
when I started my career.
I'm just gonna say that was the year I was born.
Okay, well, you see, that's when I actually started training to become an airline pilot. So I finished my training. I got my air transport pilot license in 1992. And back then, because of the first Iraq War, the aviation, especially in Europe, was hit pretty hard. And so actually, I was laid off for 3 years almost.
Wow.
And so I got my first contract in 1995. But 1995, I got the contract with the airline, and I started out in the 737. Flew that for 4 years as a first officer. I then went on to the 747-400. Flew that for 8.5 years. And then I got the chance to get a command upgrade to the 737. And I flew the 737 as a captain for another 4.5 years. And in 2012, I transitioned to the A320. And so now actually just waiting for my transfer. So I've applied for 777, 787, or 747. So I'm just waiting for the command change, which hopefully will happen this year.
That was going to be my next question, actually, was what did you have? I mean, you've been doing it for a long time, but do you have any ambitions to move on to another aircraft?
Yeah, I one of my biggest wishes when every kid has a dream, and my dream was always to become a 747 captain. That was my childhood dream, really. And I'm very close of achieving that now. And however, the strange thing is that I know the 747. It's a great aircraft, but like I said, I've been flying it already for 8 years. And actually, to have the chance maybe to do 777 or 787 is like very intriguing to me. So I don't know. We'll see what happens, what offers come up. It's a very, very volatile time at the moment. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later. But it's fast changing.
Well,
But that's how long.
I got a typical flight sim question. Of all the airplanes that you've flown in real life, which is your favorite? I have to ask that.
I was going to ask the same thing. I had it on my mind.
Yeah, and that's such a tough question to answer. I would say something that really kind of touches me emotionally. That was the 737. Strangely enough, I know the 747 is like the queen of the skies, and I have a huge respect still for that aircraft. And when I watch 747s take off, when I'm flying the A320, I'm always still in love with that aircraft. But from the amount of takeoff and landings that I've done and the emotions that I share with that, is 737 comes to mind. The A320, I always say, I kind of step around those questions and say, the A320 is a fantastic workplace. In a sense, it's extremely well made for the day-to-day work in an aircraft. It does so many things on a very efficient level, but hand flying wise, it's just a 737. You feel so connected to the aircraft, and it's so true when you put your yoke left, right, up, down, whatever. It's something else. So a 737, definitely.
Probably due to the fact that it's harkened back to the old school days kind of flying.
Yeah.
They don't need a yoke now, really, with fly-by-wire, but they still have.
Yeah, and I think one thing, even though I've been flying the A320 now for pretty much over 10 years now, it's just when it's like really windy, really gusty, you do your inputs in the flight stick, you always feel that your inputs aren't actually translated immediately to the aircraft itself, or to the elevators and ailerons and so on. You can feel the flight control computers actually doing something. And so sometimes the aircraft behaves a little bit different to what you actually intended it to do. So the aircraft lands, it's fine, it's safe and everything. But in the end, especially when it's really gusty, strong crosswinds, it's like Okay, so was it my inputs now that made the landing nice, or which part was the computer, which was mine? So yeah, that's the thing with the Airbus, really. So
Thing.
it's not so emotional for me
I got
compared
you.
to the 737. Yeah,
But as you said, it's a good work environment as far
yeah,
as the philosophy of it and the layout of it, I guess, huh?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely. So let me jump back to simming here. So, with all the, I guess, advancements in all these different airplanes and the sim, the PMDGs, the FSLabs, the Phoenixes, the Toluses, are the how should I say it? Are the developers getting it right, getting it close? Can it even come close to the real thing, feel wise and so forth? How would you rate simming now compared to what
Mm.
it used to be? And will it ever get close to the real thing?
That's a tough question to answer. I now get asked that quite often on my streams. Because obviously that's something a flight simulator wants to hear. He's investing a lot of money into a certain product, and of course he wants a real world pilot to say, yeah, you know what, that feels exactly like the real thing. However, the limitations just simply come from the fact that you are sitting at a desk, right? You're sitting in front of a screen. You're missing certain inputs that will kind of get you immersed to a greater level. But I can also say that even if you're flying a real big level D simulator with full motion, it still doesn't come that close to the real aircraft. It's just not possible. So it comes down as well for the PCs, flight sims. It comes down to your peripherals, how you maybe tweak those curves, sensitivity curves, and so on, trying to get the aircraft behave to your inputs at least, to what the real aircraft does.
Just for a
But in the
second.
end, yeah,
Sorry, go ahead, go ahead, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. So, but in the end, it's just missing, the feel of the aircraft moving underneath your backside. Right. That's really, that's why we say, flying by the seat of your pants. Right.
Right.
That's just missing in front of a PC.
And I guess that's kind of where I was going with my next question, was diving deeper into that, because I feel like as flight simmers, we become obsessed with the idea of something being study level, with the idea of
Mm,
something having a good flight model. Like those are two terms that are both controversial in any aircraft we ever fly.
yeah.
And being XP, we don't really fly aircraft in real life yet. I know we've
Mm.
both gone on GA flights and done discovery flights, things like that. And I obviously want to pursue it, but what are some of the differences? And you even mentioned in the level D simulator, from that to real life, you don't even get the full experience. And I think you might have answered this question already, but if you can go a little bit deeper, when it comes to a level D sim, which is the most like it is the simulator, it's the training platform, right, for all of you pilots. When it comes to that, which most of us will never get to see, most of us will never have on our desktop or anything close to that. What's the difference between the ultimate simulator and the real aircraft? Like, what are some of the small stuff? I know you said to see the pants feel. Is there anything else that may be different?
I guess sound is also a big topic. It's difficult to explain exactly what's missing, but I would say definitely it's the motion. The motion is really the key thing when you fly real aircraft. So as long as you're missing that, and I know people will wonder, well, how come you fly a full motion simulator? How come it isn't able to simulate the proper wind gusts or the turbulences from the real aircraft? Well, it just doesn't. I mean, I talked to Totorichko, the developer of Hot Start
Right.
TBM and
Yeah.
Challenger. He's a fantastic programmer, and he says it would be possible to actually program proper turbulences and the crosswind feeling into a level D simulator, but it's not been done yet. So I know that from our training, and believe it or not, when you do your type ratings these days, you not necessarily need real landings in the aircraft itself before you go on and fly passengers. So you can actually do that kind of landing training in a level D flight sim. And I remember that when I was doing that in the A320, the instructor was saying, with the crosswind, etc., it's just fairly basic. So when you go out into the real world and fly the real aircraft under real conditions, it's going to feel different. And yeah, it does. So it's One thing I can say though is that the immersion or the level of immersion you get from Microsoft Flight Sim or X-Plane these days is at a really high level. And that's why I kind of still enjoy flying the flight sims. And like I said, you come home from flying the real aircraft, and then you sit in front of a PC and actually fly a flight simulator. How's that possible? Well, it's the fascination and the level of immersion that you can get. And I guess the visuals, that's another thing that's really, really important. So the visuals, the sounds, and of course the motion. Yeah.
That was going to be my next question. Like, some things just can't translate, but are there things that does translate well from the desktop over to the real world thing that you find? Anything in particular that translates well, maybe just knowing the flows and stuff?
Oh yeah, I mean, when we talk about the possibility of using, the FSLabs or the Phoenix to train for your, check rides, I use it. Yes, I do it. And yes, of course, the real time development of certain failures and doing the checklists in real time, doing your workload management in real time in these flight sims, that definitely has helped me in my real world flying and check rides. And believe it or not, people have laughed at me for saying that, but we've got some airports in Europe. Paris, for example, Amsterdam, they are a nightmare to taxi around.
Yes.
And I've actually used, you know what I'm talking about. So I've actually used those flight sims and these airport add-ons to actually practice the taxiing, so that I know when I go to that airport the first time, I know where these taxi lanes are, where these gates are, and it has helped me in the real world aviation. Yeah.
I love that. I love that because I just recently myself started putting more emphasis on the taxi. Usually, we're on Vatsim and we fly into an airport and we're in a rush. Like, I'm just going to go to the first gate I see and you just taxi straight in. And then recently, I was like, you know what? I'm going to start going for an actual gate. So, I'll have somebody in my chat choose, hey, what gate are we landing at? Or are we going to when we land? And they'll pick a gate. When we get there, I'll go find that gate on the chart and basically just practice being able to navigate the taxiway. So I feel like that's another, I'm sure, like you just said, another difficulty of aviation, like of being a pilot. It's not just flying, landing the aircraft, but also successfully and safely getting to a gate.
Absolutely. And with all the buzz going on the airport, with all these people driving their lorries and cars and so on, you always got to be on the lookout, for someone trying to ram your aircraft. So definitely, that's a big part of flying. Indeed, taxiing around.
Oh yeah, there's lots of memes of.
I get nervous. I definitely get nervous when I fly in Europe on Vatsim and landing, and it's like, all right, you're gonna go to stand number whatever, because we're not used to the stands over here in the U.S. And then the taxi instructions is, as you said in Charles de Gaulle, is like, please give me a progressive taxi because I have no idea how to figure this out.
Yeah.
I mean, you started when there was paper charts.
Yeah.
Right.
I was a master at origami, I think it's called, right? When you fold paper, I was a master in that.
So you literally had to look up in the folder of the book, find the airport chart on the paper, and just follow that. Is that how you guys did it?
I'm not joking. It was that way. We have, so for, let's say, short range in Europe, we had, I guess it was about 8 big folders, and so we had brown folders, blue folders, red folders. The red folders were actually all the airports east of Berlin.
Wow.
So for each region, we had a folder. Yeah, we had to take that out, and we had to look out for the alphabetically ordered for the airport. Take out Paris, at least 100 pieces of paper, and then find your text explanation for the departure or arrival, the charts, the taxi charts, the gate charts, and then trying to bring them all into a proper order, and then clip that onto a little, side board on the window. I remember that. It's horrible. And then one of the worst things was these charts had to be updated, obviously, and it didn't happen at night all the time. So it could happen, you were in transit, and you saw that little VW drive up, that little Lloyd drive up, and you're like, oh no, please no. And that guy comes, oh, you've got paper change or the document change. And I'm like, no, you've got to be kidding me. So you had to cram all these folders into this huge kind of bag, and that it must have weighed at least, I would say, 50 kilograms. And so that poor fella who had really huge arms, he just exchanged those big kind of I would say suitcases, but it's like a really huge bag, and they exchanged that for us.
I
But
love
yeah,
this.
that was
I love it.
bad.
I love it.
Yeah.
So help just for fun. What's the comparison of your paper chart flight bag versus today's flight bag?
That's something, that's a development that is fascinating. So now you have an iPad or tablet, whatever, and you have millions of charts in there, right? You can do everything, the performance calculation, anything you can think of, all your documents, right? All your regulations, everything is in that little tablet. That's mind-boggling. And
Wow.
back then, obviously, we just not only had the airport charts as folders. We had everything, all the all documents you needed. Performance. I remember performance calculation were like 3-4 huge folders for each airport, for each runway, for each kind of temperature layout. You had charts. You had to go through these. And obviously, it was always the first officers that had to do it, never the captain. It was always the first officer. And that was a nightmare. And boy, you had to be so careful not to pick up the wrong piece of paper and get the performance calculations wrong.
That's amazing.
I don't know if you know, but I was a former flight attendant. I worked for a charter airline and United Airlines, and I did have a manual. And whenever there was a revision that came out, once you showed up to base, you had to grab that revision, review it, put it in the folder, log it, and make sure you have it ready for the FAA just in case they ask if you did your revision.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
So you guys had the same thing, had to do?
Yeah, exactly. So I remember coming home from, well, let's say you had a 3-week holiday and you opened up your office kind of mailbox, and it had thousands of pages that you had to, like you said, go through. And it was not like, you could take 50 pages and just simply exchange them. No, you had to look through which page has actually changed. And I remember doing that with my wife, because sometimes it would take hours to exchange that. And like I said, it was a requirement. So if the FAA ever checked your documents, right, you would be in big trouble if you hadn't updated your regulations and charts and so on. Crazy. Wow. And nowadays it's just one click a button, right? You say update, and that's it. It downloads all the data and inserts, and you have a little kind of information what has been changed, right? And that's it.
That's it. Wow. So let me go back here. Speaking of paper charts, what is it that got you into aviation? How did your aviation career actually start? How did you get into aviation? Real world flying?
Great question. Well, so like for so many of us, it's really the father that was a pilot. So my dad was actually a pilot in the German Air Force. He flew the Starfighter and the Tornado.
Wow.
And I remember, as a little kid, I remember, the moment I actually have a memory. I actually have pictures of my dad flying the Starfighter. And back then here in Germany, so in order to have the public, opinion not drop negatively because of the noise, etc., the kind of, it's a war instrument, etc. Germans obviously are a bit sensitive in that regard. They did these open days, right? So these 2 or 3 times a year where people just simply go onto that military base and walk right next up to the Starfighter and watch those flight displays and so on. I remember that my dad was a flight display pilot back then.
Oh, wow.
And so I remember so many flight shows where he was performing, and wow, that's really my fascination. And I started glider flying when I was 12.
Ooh.
So actually my big dream, obviously with Top Gun coming out in 1986, I think it was.
Yes.
Well, I thought, that's it. I've got to become a
So
jet
wait,
pilot.
were you one of the many million pilots influenced by the original Top Gun?
Oh yeah, because I did want to become a Air Force pilot, obviously. I actually went. So when I came back from England, where I did my studies, my father was back then an instructor in the UK on the Tornado. Because a kind of joint kind of effort with the Italians, Germans, and the English people. So so he was instructor there, and so that's why we moved over to the UK with him. And so I came back to Germany, and I was 18 years old, and I got drafted immediately into the military. I had to do my national service for about 18 months or so. And I thought, well, I'm going to use that time to actually try to get the option at least to become a Air Force pilot. And so I did all the tests, all the medical tests, etc., ability tests, and actually got the contract. So I could have signed up. And then my dad said, you know what, it's just not like it used to be. There's so many restrictions. The public is more and more negative on the military. Maybe you should go and try to start a career as an airline pilot. And I thought, he said, well, if you're into fast aircraft, there's aerobatic aircraft you can fly, etc. You don't have to be a fighter pilot. And so, I actually applied at the German airline, and I got the chance there, and that's how I became an airline pilot. I'm not a jet pilot.
And I'm listening to you saying that, and I want to ask you a question about, because we get tons of questions in different people's chats. How do you become a pilot? The United States have a 1,500-hour requirement now. There's not many academies as like in Europe. When you got in, you said you applied directly to the airline itself, was it?
Yeah. So back then, I was very fortunate because the way, at least it worked here in Germany, was that the big airlines actually had their own programs. So we called it Ab Initio. You didn't have, there was no requirement for you to have any prior flight experience.
Wow.
So you would just do the tests, certain tests for the ability to become an airline pilot. If you passed those tests, then you got a chance to actually start the training with the airline. And back then, I was lucky; I only had to pay. It was about 15,000 euros, compared to the 100,000, 120,000 euros that young people need to bring to the table these days.
Wow.
Which I find absolutely crazy. I can't believe that so many people, young people, having that passion and having the ability to become great pilots are actually robbed of that chance because of that high price tag. So back then, I was lucky enough to just be able to sign up and literally get. I didn't get paid, but the housing, for example, when we did the training part in the US, the housing was paid for us. So a completely different kind of setup. So here in Europe, at the moment, it's still quite difficult to become an airline pilot. You have to bring the 100,000 euros or 120,000 euros, depending on what airline you want to become a pilot for. And with that comes a huge risk, because there's no guarantee that you're going to be finishing it, right? Because there's one part with the flight school saying, we're going to give you all the documents, we're going to give you the training, the teaching, and the flight hours for you to have the chance. But in the end, it's going to be an official test or several official tests by the authorities in the end, that then decide whether or not you have the ability and if you've acquired the knowledge to pass those tests. If you just fail right at the end, that's it. You've paid so much money for the training without actually acquiring a license in the end.
Wow.
So that's the risk factor that people have to also look at in the end.
So it's like an investment, like a medical school or something,
Yeah.
where you have to put the money up front to get it. I'm not sure how much you know about the US way of going about becoming an airline pilot. Would you say Europe is more streamlined in getting in if you have the money than the US, or how would you compare if you know anything about it?
Yeah, the system in the US, obviously, you have a very large military as well. So you're able to actually gather a lot of airline pilots later on from ex-military pilots, which we don't really have in Germany. So I guess that's one part where airlines will say, well, we need that many pilots, airline pilots. Well, then we have to kind of look at the pool of available possible pilots for the future. And then they will dictate the conditions, i.e. price tag. And we've seen the price tags actually vary quite strongly from I think the lowest I've seen was 40,000 a couple of years back before COVID. And now, however, it's back to over 100,000. But in the US, obviously, you have a different system where you start out um, your flying career, with small aircraft, and you get the flight hours on those, and then you progress to maybe a turboprop or a private jet, and then you acquire a certain amount of hours on that, and then if you're lucky, at some point, you get the chance to join an airline. Yeah.
Wow, so I am completely unknowledgeable apparently in all this because I did not realize how different the path to an airline pilot was in Europe versus the US. Like I thought Europe was like just like the US, at least in that stance. So you're saying that you basically walk up to some person at the office, and be like, "Hey, I want to be a pilot. Here's $100,000," and you just get an itinerary for that, and then if you complete it, you have a chance to maybe get into an airline. Is that kind
Yeah.
of in a nutshell how it works?
Yeah, exactly. So I know it kind of, when you have your US system, you kind of think, oh, hang on, you've got young people then with pretty much zero experience, i.e., well, maybe 120 flight hours in a single prop, or maybe, a couple of hours, 30 hours in twin prop. How are you allowing these young people suddenly then with, 40, 50 hours of jet training in the actual airline or airliner 737, A320? You actually let those people then fly passengers around the world, right? You can't be serious, right? But yeah, that's how the system works. Yeah. So
And what
obviously
about
there are those. Mhm.
sorry, what about I just got a question popped up in the chat. What about like training like CFIs? How does that work in Europe?
Yeah, well, of course, there you have to have a certain amount of experience and flight hours. The same goes for the requirements hours to become a commander, captain. That is, of course, very, very strictly regulated by the authorities. Um, but yeah, apart from that, to simply join an airline as a young airline pilot, as a first officer, that's a lot easier than compared to the US. Yeah.
Wow. How was, do you remember your first time actually flying a commercial jet? I guess maybe what, base training or something. Do you remember that? And how
Oh
was
yeah.
that? Like the very first, how did that go? Like your very first, okay, I've studied, I've flown these other small planes, I've done everything. Uh, Now are you going to take me up and see if I can land a big plane? What plane was it, and how was that experience for you?
Yeah. So the good thing is that your training is like stepping stones. So you go from small aircraft and maybe twin props, and then a small jet or turboprop, and then you go on to a jet, so 737, A320. So I remember the first time actually being then in the 737 simulator back then when I was a first officer or second officer. It was just like this aircraft was just so fast. I mean, even with all the prior experience, it was just so fast. You could cover 1,000 kilometers or 1,000 miles, within like 1.5 hours, or a shorter distance, take off land in such a short amount of time. And then there's so many things that you had to do, look at, and brief, and so on. That takes practice, obviously. When it came to actually then doing the landing training, so I do remember the first time I was actually landing a 737 in real. That was on Paphos, in Cyprus, or
Great.
on the yes, on as well as
Wow.
Cyprus, the island. So I remember that very vividly because it was a very bumpy day,
Hmm.
and the patterns were, of course, very, very quick as well. And I remember being just so focused, and I think I did like 6 landings the first round, and then it was a break or maybe the next day with the next 6 landings. But I was lucky that it went well in the sense that the instructor was happy with my progress and what I delivered, and that really kind of motivated me, and so it went really nice for me, and that was obviously a very nice experience. And then just a thrill in the end, saying getting your final okay to then go into line training. And then I remember very vividly my actual first time flying with passengers on board.
Mm.
And it was back then we actually did charter flights on the weekends. And so we actually flew to Ibiza. an island just south of Mallorca. And I was like, always ILS approaches, etc. And then we got into approach, and the captain called in, and the approach controller says, "All right, you want to do a visual approach?" And so the chat captain looked at me and said, "You want to do a visual approach?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course, right? I'm not going to chicken out now, right? I'm a real world pilot now, so yeah." And I was like, I had no idea what I where I was and what I need to do. And so luckily the instructor actually talked me through it, but it went fairly well. And the first landing wasn't hard, or it was just maybe lucky, but I do remember that very, very vividly. It's just one of those things that just I don't know, it's just so satisfying, right? Because prior it was almost 3 very hard years of studying and being graded all the time, and the supervision, and so finally being able to get so close, or actually achieving finally the last check ride, and then being called first officer, and then go on to the normal flying without training captains. Brilliant. That was huge. Those people that fly in private and will remember their first solo as well, kind of that kind of feeling.
I can't begin to imagine the mass just bringing that airplane down underneath you with 100,000 pounds or whatever. It has to be crazy. Wow.
I have to ask. It was asked in the chat as well, and I'm sure you get it on your streams all the time, but I gotta ask the question, and that is, so far, if you can even choose one, what is your favorite approach?
Oh, yeah, I do get asked that quite often. So, I mean, here in Europe, there are some approaches which are just absolutely beautiful landscape-wise, but obviously have the same kind of, or on top of that, a very demanding approach. Demanding in the sense that it's just not a straight ILS approach. It's actually a curved approach, or maybe some visual parts in it, or actually have mountains around the airport which create a lot of turbulence. So Bilbao, for example, comes to mind. Or Nice actually is one of those airports that allow you to do these kind of VOR approaches, and followed by the visual approach onto the runway. So I've just been to Faro, for example, last week, south of Spain, or Portugal actually, which another absolutely beautiful approach, landscape-wise, so beautiful. And they're actually being offered visual approaches. And I guess that's really the key, is it's like, getting away from the standard ILS approach, being able to kind of, have a feel that, hey, you know what? Switch off flight directors, right? Just look outside and trying to do a proper, energy management, trying to get the aircraft into the right spot, and have a nice stable approach in the end. Yeah, that's the thing. So I can't really name a single airport. It's several airports. Salzburg comes to mind, for example, in Austria. That's absolutely beautiful and very demanding as well. Yeah, so these kind of airports.
See, now I'm here getting jealous as listening to you describing clicking off the flight directors on the autopilot and just hand flying in. Wow.
Yeah,
Gotta be awesome.
It's one of those things. Obviously, we have rules and regulations saying that obviously you always should have the highest level of safety, in the sense of automation or guidance. But luckily, the airlines have kind of realized that the skills of a pilot can only be maintained if they actually fly and hand fly, and actually switch off these guidance methods, and then just try to get the feel for the aircraft, look outside, where am I, what's my energy state of the aircraft, and hand fly down, which is so important, because there's been accidents where pilots just simply couldn't even perform the basic maneuvers, pitch power.
Wow.
So there's been a couple of very tragic accidents that could have been avoided by having pilots actually more regularly fly in real, not sim. I mean, we can all fly simulators, right? But actually doing it in real life, and just having the the courage and the motivation to do that. And yes, you can mess up, more likely, in the sense that you're going to have to go around because you messed up the energy state of the aircraft. And well, okay, you have to go around, which does cost time and money, but it's vitally important for your proficiency as a pilot.
Wow. Yeah, that mean I'm just thinking about all the automation that's available with all these airplanes now that, does does the airline want to tell you, hey, autopilot off at 400 feet, 500 feet, or do they allow you discretion to determine what?
Yeah, so there are obviously certain things that they put in order. So safety is top, right? That's safety, safety, safety. And then of course you have things like efficiency, fuel efficiency, and passenger comfort, right? So these are goals that you have to achieve on each flight. The aircraft nowadays with the flight guidance, with the technology available, you can obviously, the pilots will try to achieve a, of course, safe but also very efficient flight, i.e., trying to use as little fuel as possible. So anything that hinders that, so anything you do that actually jeopardizes that, you're not going to do it, or you shouldn't do it. However, with the sense of a visual approach, I actually have a good argument to performing one, and that is you save a lot of track miles by doing a visual approach.
Ah,
Yeah.
there you
Right?
go.
So you're a lot closer to the airfield. You do a much tighter pattern, and a visual pattern, if you fly it, in the standard method, is a very safe, normal procedure. Right? We get taught that, and when we do that on every flight submission we have. And it's just trying to get your, get out of your comfort zone in that sense, right? Being asked, and there are certain airports in Europe, literally, you have every time the chance to do a visual approach. Linz, for example, is one of those. Sofia, I've done 2 visual approaches in the last 6 weeks, I think, in Sofia.
Nice.
So yeah, it does save a lot of time. You can save like 5 minutes flight time by doing a visual approach, and it's a lot of fun, and it keeps you at a higher level, of training and well, there obviously you may have messed about sometime with some failures, and you can actually have failures in the A320 where you don't have flight guidance available anymore.
Hmm.
So you have to be able to not only fly without flight directors, you have to be able to do that in direct law. So these things, if you do them regularly, so you stay proficient, then you're going to have a much easier time if that actually happens to you in real life at some point.
Nice. Wow. I could listen to you talk about real world flying for like the next 5 hours.
I
and
could
would be
too. I
bored.
do want to ask one more thing, just to dip our toe into a little bit of deeper water here. Just how is, especially specifically in Europe, and for you and your career, what is the pilot lifestyle like for you, and how do you feel about it? Also, how does your wife cope with your pilot lifestyle?
And that's a great question because that touches obviously an area that is not discussed very often.
And that's why I'm asking. Can we need
yeah,
to? Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's a fantastic question, and so it's the dark side of being an airline pilot, really. So being away, so it depends, of course, what kind of roster you have. If you have a base at your home place, then you'll be home every evening. But for me, I actually go on mostly 5-day trips. So I actually stay in hotels, and then after 5 days, I will come back home again, and then have 2 days off, and I'll be working for 5 days again.
Yes.
So once a month, I have 4 days off, which I'm actually have right now. So that gives me a chance, and of course, be home a bit longer. But yeah, when I actually got to or met my wife back in 1990, I actually told her that being a wife and airline pilot is not easy. You're gonna have to be kind of self-sustainable in the sense that you're gonna have to have your own life. So you need to have either your own job or well, if children are on their way at some point, and then she will be able to raise the children. But still, she's got to remain her own self, in the sense that, if she has a prior career or something, she will be pursuing that. And there will be people that say, I can't imagine my husband being away for such a long time, every month, year after year. And it's tough. And not many relationships or marriages actually survive that kind of lifestyle. I've been lucky. I've been fortunate that my wife has actually, accepted that kind of lifestyle. And so we're still together after. Oh God, I've got to do some maths.
Don't get in trouble. She might be watching.
Don't get it wrong.
My wife's asleep, luckily. So it's a long time, and I feel very lucky and very fortunate to have her. And
That's good to hear.
Let me.
You probably said. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Just and I know XP can also, because he worked in the airline industry as well, and I would love for him to share a little bit of his story as well if he wants. But first of all, thank you for answering the question. I wish that I would ask this to more pilots, and I will in the future continue to ask this, because I feel like you said, this is a dark part of being a pilot, and not all relationships work out for that part only. Just because you are gone for whatever, 5 days, 7 days, if you're a long haul captain, it could be even longer, right? Like, it depends on what you're, and that's what I tell people when they ask me, like, what kind of pilot do I want to be? I'm like, well, that depends on the lifestyle and my family situation, because it takes a special woman, you know what I mean, to stick around with a pilot through his lifestyle and be faithful to him, and for them to be faithful to each other. I'm really going deep right now. I'm sorry. Actually, I'm not sorry. But these are things that need to be said. And seriously, it's things that need to be talked about and discussed, especially throughout our flight sim community of people who are really looking forward to becoming a pilot. We see the glamorous side. We see the shiny side. We see how amazing this looks. We love it, right? We love this passion. But at the same time, there are things that we need to consider before getting into this career, and that is, again, is the lifestyle. Like, how much are you gonna be home? Can you deal with that? Can your family deal with that as well? The training, can you fight through the training? It's not gonna be easy. Like, we use a flight sim to learn everything, but there's a lot of stuff in the flight sim that we don't really train with and for, and then the money as well. I'm glad you mentioned that as well for our Europeans out there. So thanks for answering that. That's why I just wanted to go there.
Here's the funny part about it, is because you're on the airplane, so that's your office, and then you go home, and your spouse should benefit from your airline benefits, fly for free or whatever the case. But you're like, you don't want to go anywhere because you just came off an airplane. And they're home. Yep.
Yeah. So before I touch that topic, also one thing that I find always very kind of striking is that, especially as I've become a captain, so when I go on a 5-day trip, I am responsible for my crew, and of course, for the aircraft, for the passengers, and so on. So I'm kind of a leader, and people expect me to lead, and you take on that role, and it's tough when you come home. You have to switch, like I said, from being an airline captain to being a spouse, and actually going into a different kind of mindset, because I'm sure my wife wouldn't appreciate me, being a captain at home, right? So you have to find your place again, which takes some time, some adaptation time. And of course, if my wife were here now and you would ask her, well, what's one of the things that really get on your nerves? She would say, well, my husband complaining about stuff that happened while he was flying, right? So there's always things that go wrong, and some things that really are annoying. And so my wife obviously gets those stories, and luckily she still, after such a long time, still listens and nods, and does her part really well, and understanding my bad mood sometimes, which I may bring home.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, but with your question regarding going on holiday, I guess that's where you're aiming at.
Yep.
So one thing I absolutely hate is living out of your suitcase. And you can imagine, right, 5 days, each night you're a different hotel. You've got to pack your suitcase, unpack your suitcase. Actually, I don't unpack it anymore. I just take out the stuff I need, all right, and the rest remains in the suitcase. So I've become very efficient in that area. Man, if you give me the choice, home on your porch, or go take a flight somewhere to a hotel, I'm like, oh, I'll take the porch. But obviously, my wife doesn't want that. All right, I
Right.
understand that as well. She's home all the time. Well, now it's holiday. Now she wants to finally get on an aircraft and fly somewhere and enjoy the holidays. So, yeah, we do go on holidays, and it was just COVID, which kind of brought things to a standstill. But yeah, we do some nice trips around the world, and yeah.
Wow. And I see that the flying is back now in full
Mm.
force in Europe. Crazy airport delays and
Oh
people
yeah.
and wow, 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 wow.
Just out of
Yeah.
curiosity, briefly, how did COVID affect you?
So, in one of the things, I mean, flying for such a long time, I've gone through several crises, right? There was SARS a long time ago, MERS, all these different viruses that came up, bird flu, 9/11, you name it, the banking crisis, 2007. So there was so many things that happened that really disturbed aviation. But experience shows that once that phase stabilizes and we get past that, the growth rates just continue again, and we're seeing the same thing right now. So the bounce back, people wanting to travel after such a long time of not being able to, has actually surprised, I think, everyone here in Europe, all the managers of airports, airlines, you name it. Yeah, we're missing staff everywhere. So crazy times, but yeah, I'm lucky. And how has it affected me? Well, it brought things to a shocking standstill in such a short time.
Wow.
That I was actually off flying for 7 months in a row.
Wow.
Yeah. So I didn't touch any real world cockpits for 7 months, which was crazy. It's just unbelievable. So when we finally got back, we actually got a basic training again with the airline. So we did several flight simulator missions, normal operation, abnormal operation, and then even a full 5-day rotation with the training captain on the line again, with passengers on board, to make sure that you are proficient enough to go on your own again. But funnily enough, it's like riding a bike. Weirdly enough, I wouldn't have expected to come back into the flow so quickly after such a long time.
Wow. Now that's safety. Knowing that they put you guys through all the stuff, even with a line captain, that's good. That's good to know.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's one saying, if you think training or aviation is expensive, well, try an accident. So that's luckily something airlines are always really weary about and want to avoid, obviously, at all costs. So that's definitely something required. Yeah.
So now I have a friend of mine. He's also a streamer. Some people may know who I'm talking about, but he is a ramp agent at Gatwick. And he mentioned to me that there is a major shortage in employees, and you mentioned that as well a little bit as you just this because of the way that everything popped back up right after COVID. Like now we're finally opening up, all the countries are letting people in, people are flying again, and airlines are not able to keep up with their airline employees. Now we've heard a lot over here. I'm not sure if this is a worldwide thing or if this is just a US thing, but we've heard a lot about a pilot shortage. Does this also apply to Europe and Germany?
Yeah. So the pilot shortage discussion has been going on for a long, long time, and experts have seen that coming prior to COVID already. So that issue has been there, and we could go into the future plans in a minute. The surprise actually just came with the fact that the bounce back was so strong and so quick. And I guess, if you're a manager of an airline, let's say, you obviously want to cash in on that trend. So you do sell tickets, and then suddenly they realize they've sold tickets for flights which they don't have the staff for. And we still have a pandemic. There's still lots of people ill from time to time from COVID and having to stay at home. So yeah, the shortages are in part because of people being sick, and in parts of people actually, or actually having left the aviation industry. Not so much pilots, but in other areas, and they're not coming back because they found better jobs elsewhere or better paid job elsewhere, and that's the issue we're facing at the moment. I'm just seeing some questions in the chat.
Yeah, there's a
If
couple
that's
of
okay.
couple of
Yeah.
questions here. The last one from Tyler Smith saying, curious to hear your thoughts regarding robot pilots or fully automated aircraft. I mean,
Yeah.
I know Airbus is doing the A350 that's fully
Mm.
automated from taxi, takeoff, land, and taxi, correct?
Yeah.
Is that true? Yeah.
Yeah.
What are your
So
thoughts on those things?
yeah. So first, just a question: how do you feel as a passenger on a flight? I actually feel quite comfortable, unless it's like really stormy. Then I'd rather be in the front flying myself than being a passenger. But
Nice.
otherwise, I'm all right with being a passenger. I know that the people up front are very well trained and I have full trust in their abilities. So yeah, so nowadays when I'm being asked by people, let's say typical example, someone will come up to me and say, hey, an airline pilot, my son is just finishing high school and he's actually looking into becoming an airline pilot. So maybe you can have a chat with him. And I'll say, yeah, I'll have a chat with him, but I'll be absolutely honest. And what I have to say to these young people is something that maybe they don't really want to hear.
And what is that?
And yeah, so automation is something that has been, in the in the process of being implemented more and more over time. And we're seeing that in the private sector. So first, military, obviously, with the drones, but now we're seeing actually some jet aircraft that have an automated landing option. So if there's an emergency, you press a button, the aircraft will actually then fly to the next airport and land there automatically. Right. So we're seeing the development of these systems come into these aircraft being licensed. And with the A350, there is a study going on in Europe, and actually money has been flowing from the EASA, so European Aviation Board, into universities or companies that actually are working on a concept, and that's a single pilot cruise concept. And that is aiming to very soon, we'll talk about 3-4 years from now, to actually have only one pilot fly during cruise flight in the cockpit. And so the systems being developed, including monitoring systems, safety systems in case of, let's say, rapid decompression or something, and then having to do that single pilot method. That's being now, worked on. And I had an interesting discussion with an engineer about 2 years ago on this topic, and he said, "Well, you know what the real motivation is?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course, you want to save some money on wages for pilots, right? Because that's always what I hear. I'm a pilot, I'm way too expensive, all right." So,
Yeah.
that's the motivation. I said, no, you're wrong. The motivation is the fact that the rising demand worldwide with air travel is so great that even if you start training at max capacity with all the flight schools around the world, you will not be able to meet the demand of airline pilots in the next 20, 30 years.
Wow.
So they were building aircraft where there will be no pilots to fly them. So the single pilot concept, at least the single pilot cruise concept, is a first step into that direction, where you will save one cruise relief pilot at least. All right. So one less pilot needed to be trained for those kind of sections of the flight. Because there are obviously certain distances where you'll have either 3 or 4 pilots in the flight deck, and they will be rotating with their brakes during flight. So that's a concept that is really, really being forced on at the moment. That will come, and that won't be too much longer now.
Wow. I'm actually surprised you said 2 to 3 or 4 years or something like that. I'm always skeptical. I'm always thinking this is just money. This is just no benefits to pay for, no medical, no dental, no pension, automate. But it's society. We can't stop it, can we?
Yeah. So let me give you an example, at least that works for Europe. So if you pay, let's say, $100 for a flight from A to B, how much of that money goes into the pockets of the pilots? What would you guess?
Good question. I think
Both pilots together.
Yeah, I mean, I always know that the highest expense of any business is the employees first. So I want to say, I don't know, $30
Nope.
from the.
I was gonna say 5.
Well, you're very close to that. 2.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
So the most expensive part is kerosene, obviously the jet fuel, right? That's the
Yeah.
most expensive part, right?
Right.
And so, but the pilots, the pilot just make up about 2% of those costs of a
Wow.
flight. So
Wow.
the motivation to get rid of one, yeah, if you really need every penny, well, yeah, of course, that's an argument, but that's not the main argument at the moment, right? So the main motivation is the fact that airlines or aircraft manufacturers will build planes and nobody will be able to fly them. There's just not enough pilots around the world.
Wow.
So
I'm not sure I'll be traveling then. I don't know.
here's the thing: is like I don't know. I always like to think differently at things like this. And I'm like, all right, well, if we think into the future, then our kids, would it not be a bad idea for them to go in the direction of like aircraft mechanic or engineer? So I mean, because for them, if an aircraft is unmanned, that's cool, but there's not going to be an automated system to maintenance that aircraft to keep it flying, keep it running, or even fly it from the ground. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely. So robots could take over part of these things, but I guess there's a lot of things that robots can't do in regards to maintenance. Yeah, for sure. The same discussion is going on with air traffic control, for example, right? They're saying, well, you could develop software that has the same kind of abilities as a human being. But if we kind of go even further into the future, so we're now being asked, well, do you think that we're going to see fully automated flights at some point? So nobody in the cockpit anymore. And we'll say, well, that is something I can't see for the next, let's say, 20, 30 years. Because there's one thing machines don't have, and that is intuition. So the gut feelings kind of stuff, right? That's something humans have. And humans actually have a fantastic ability to kind of, do a decision making process or a fact finding or solution finding process that can be very quick from experience, and they can take these things and do that very quickly. That's something machines still fail to do, even though you can program a lot of things into a computer. That kind of human ability is still obviously missing in these machines. So I can't. Well, if you think about what is required to actually have that being programmed, so the human kind of mindset, you would need a huge machine. And I've heard some scientists actually say even the biggest computers these days can't achieve that. So now we're talking about a machine that's so huge that requires so much electric power and so much space. How are you going to put that onto an aircraft?
Yeah.
Or you're going to say, well, hang on, let's put it on the ground and just have a remote connection, right? Well, that can be hacked, right? So so there's still some issues with that regard as well.
Mark this date. Here's my prediction as I'm listening to you talk about remote connections. The way the military does it right now, they have drone and they have drones are flying in a different continent and they have the controllers here in the US flying those drones. Yes. In a pod. So if the what I'm envisioning is like, on my job, we used to have one person do one task. Now what we call support, that support person is multitasking between 3 different people at the same time. And so you get a bunch of controllers in a room at their desk and their computer screens, and they're controlling 3 times the amount of airplane. So you have 100 controllers controlling 300 airplanes. And once you get to the process of takeoff, it's just automated flying almost the entire way. And they can just monitor these planes and then only get to a particular plane during the descent and landing phase and do it that way. But we'll see. In 20 years, that's where we're going to be.
It makes sense, but that scares me. The thought of being a passenger in a heavy airliner and knowing that, all right, the guy has taken us off and now he's flying some other plane.
But hold on. But we feel this way, but our children and grandchildren are not, because they're used to an automated age anyway. With the Tesla driving car, they're not, they don't want to own cars that they have to drive and change the gear manually. They want a car that auto drives on the highway. and they can be on their phones.
Yep.
So the new generation might accept it. I don't know.
Yep.
Just saying.
There've actually been some polls being done on that already, and exactly like I say, the younger generation is a lot more likely to accept that
Yeah.
than the older generation. We have something, a safety kind of number, 10 to the power minus 8. That's the amount of safety that we aim for, meaning that you have a certain amount of total losses in such and such many years. So let's say, one fatality or one fatal crash in 10 years is something that the public accepts, just to throw a number out there. So you're going to have to prove at some point that the automation achieves that same level of safety. And if that is proven at some point, then people will be able to accept it. There's always going to be some, starting point, obviously, and you're going to have to convince the public that, autonomous flying is safe. But yeah, who knows? At some point, it probably will happen in the future. But
I think
me
what could
personally,
Go ahead, sorry.
yeah, so I think it's not going to happen next 30 years. I think it's going to take a bit more than that.
But yeah, I think it may roll out, and I know we're kind of getting off in the weeds here, but I think it may roll out in a form of like how, an Amazon, an Uber, like stuff like that, where they're like, all right, well, we've found a way to automate getting our packages farther, faster with an aircraft, and that aircraft is a robot the full way, right? And they prove that they can deliver packages from A to B over and over and over and over, and they are basically the test subjects doing this flying cargo, flying things and not people. And then other airlines will be like, I've been watching them. They've done this. They're saving money. They're making tons of money compared to us, right? Because they're not, whatever. And I think that's probably the way it may eventually kind of get adapted. But
it could be, yeah.
Yeah, let's switch subjects real quick.
I was going to say, let's switch.
Personally, I'm super interested in what you said about that, and I love that you're just honest with people. But let's go back to I want to personally, as a streamer, learn about you as a streamer, right?
Yeah.
You've been streaming for a long time. I've heard people in the chat already say they basically grown up with you. They were like watching you when they were 11 years old, before it's really cool to see that. But so I believe you started on Twitch. How did that go? How did you see growth? And I believe you're now on YouTube only. So can you just kind of tell, your story streaming wise?
Yeah. So Twitch obviously was a platform that was a lot easier to get into, and the flight sim section there was already established. I think Chewy was one of the first bigger names there. And so I was actually I think one of the first real world pilots actually doing the streams there. And of course, from viewer numbers point of view, it was very, very dynamic. And obviously then with FSLabs, with the previews, when they brought a new aircraft type, et cetera, that really kind of brought huge amount of numbers of people in. But I finally ran into an issue with Twitch where I was looking at the amount of money they take from these small streamers, and I was saying, you know what, I think I would like to discuss and maybe change that share a bit because I find it unfair, and they would just not go into that at all. It's just like, well, take it or leave it, which I found just quite arrogant from them. And so they have a certain kind of limit you have to be over with the amount of subscribers, et cetera. And that kind of initially got me annoyed, and then after a while I was actually over that limit for certain. And they say, no, you have to be over that for 3 solid months. And like, but hang on, why? It's gifted subs. No, gifted subs don't count. And I say, hey, well, no, you're taking 50% of the share of the gifted subs, so how come they don't count? Right? Doesn't make sense, but they just would not go into that. They just completely ignored my comments on that. But the big deal came when they leaked personal data, and so so all of my data was openly visible for a certain amount of time, including my real world name, etc. The income I've made, etc. And here in Europe, that's actually a big deal. Companies can get fined millions of dollars or euros if they actually leak that kind of data. And so I actually told them, hey, you know what? I want to know exactly what you leaked. They completely ignored my requests on that. So literally, I would have had to take a lawyer to see what has been leaked, and what consequences that would have. But again, that kind of behavior is something that I just couldn't take anymore. I just said, you know what, even though I'm going to be downsizing, or it's going to be a step back again, trying to get myself established on YouTube. I'm going to do it. I'm going to go on YouTube, and the one motivation was that way. Another thing was that I actually drifted off a bit from my initial kind of way of doing things with the tutorial videos, and I've actually just at some point just became a complete 100% streamer. And I want to change that again. Unfortunately, so now the plan, beginning of the year when I changed to YouTube, I was going to be making some more tutorial videos, especially with the Phoenix coming out. The Phoenix took a bit longer than expected, and then, well, now with past COVID, or at least the upturn in travel, I've just been flying overtime since the beginning of April, and so I've had so little time at home. And then when I was at home, either stream as well, or doing the testing for Phoenix. I just up to this point had no real chance to do tutorial videos, which I do want to go back into, because they're a lot of fun to do. It kind of artistic way of doing things, and having something put up on your channel, and then people commenting on it and saying, hey, fantastic video, and it really helped me on this and this. That's a great feedback. That's something content creators love to hear. But in the meantime, obviously, we have a lot more real-world pilots actually have come and joined the party.
Yep.
Which is great. Don't get me wrong on that. It's fantastic, because it helps the flight simmers to get into these aircraft, these complicated simulated aircraft, a lot quicker these days. And actually being able and being shown how we can actually use those to actually increase your level of immersion, and in the end, the enjoyment you get out of those.
Oh yeah, I mean, we have, as you said, a lot of real world pilots now in this in the simming, and especially with Microsoft coming out. But I love to go through the different pilots and see what their op is like with their particular airline, because it's not all the same, as you start to realize.
Yeah.
You know, that gives us a glimpse into what you guys do, and how it's similar and how it's different to flying the airplane and so forth. So I did remember that Twitch breach, by the way, where it exposed a whole bunch of things. But wow, I did not know that part of it. Let me ask you in general, the state of the flight sim industry now. P3D, FSX, X-Plane, now Microsoft Flight Sim, X-Plane 12.
Don't forget DCS World.
Yeah, DCS. Yeah.
DCS World. What are your thoughts on where we are now, where we're going, winners, losers, or none at all? And what are your thoughts on all the simming stuff that's going on?
Yeah, it kind of points to the direction. I guess you'll be asked that question often as well, guys. What's your favorite sim, or which one is the most realistic simulator, etc., etc. And there isn't one single simulator that I would prefer over all the others. Each of these platforms has its advantages and its disadvantages. Be it the base with the weather simulation, or the turbulence simulation, etc., or the add-ons available for that platform. And so, if you had asked me that question 2 years ago, so prior to the release of Microsoft Flight Sim, I would have said, well, X-Plane 11 has maybe the more realistic flight dynamics compared to P3D, but P3D has much better and more detailed aircraft add-ons that I enjoy using. But yeah, with Microsoft, it kind of was a bit overhyped at the start. I was skeptical back then. And when I actually tried it, there weren't really any good add-ons for it, right? Especially with the airliners. So I wasn't really getting any kind of very good immersion out of these things. So I actually streamed Microsoft very rarely at the beginning for the, let's say, first year or so. And I remember that once we got the improvements through the fly-by-wire mod, it slowly picked up pace, and it became more interesting to use. And now we actually reaching with these PMDG 737 and the Phoenix add-on now, or the some GA aircraft add-ons. now we're actually able to enjoy these detailed aircraft add-ons combined with Microsoft, visuals and the weather simulation, etc. So for me, what I find absolutely fascinating in Microsoft Flight Sim is the changing weather dynamics. So you can actually see, rain showers move through the airfield. And I've had an experience not too long ago where it was marginal weather, and I was landing, and there was a couple of people flying along with me that were behind me. So some guy in front of me, he had like 5 kilometers visibility, and then when I approached, I had like 1 because a huge rain shower was just drifting through. And then 10 minutes later, behind me, the guys, they were already almost with cab okay, right? So I love that kind of just real world kind of simulation, or be it the Earth's shadow.
Yep.
That's something I've never seen before in any other flight sim. Right. So not sure if people know what I'm talking about. Is when the sun is setting, so the sun just dips below the horizon, in cruising level, and you look onto the opposite side, and you see the shadow of the Earth actually being reflected in the atmosphere, and it has a kind of a dark shade to it. It's very kind of characteristic, and in real life, I love it. It's lovely to watch, and actually seeing that in Microsoft is like one of those wow effects. It's just unbelievable. Right? It just simulates that. Another thing I had was an approach where there was kind of cloudy, rainy, and some reflections, like like a rainbow reflection, that I've never seen anywhere else either. All right. So with the sun setting, the kind of orangey glow with it, I've seen it in real life, but I've never seen that in a flight sim, and Microsoft has done that. So that adds to immersion, and that's where the fascination really comes from. There are still some things that need to be improved, obviously, but regarding flight sims, I'm excited about X-Plane 12 because that's going to be a huge step visually, and of course with snow or contamination now being added in form of standing water or even snow covering the ground. That is exciting because that again adds more realism. Something you have to deal with as a pilot on a daily basis if you're a real-world pilot. And P3D, unfortunately, I've not heard much from P3D. I mean, they're very quiet anyways, but I just do not know. I just do not see them progressing at the pace or to keep up with Microsoft Flight Sim or X-Plane 12. That's the thing at the moment.
Wow.
Yeah, it seems to me that P3D's user experience is kind of an afterthought. Like I feel like they're probably going to do something eventually, but it'll be in reaction to what they're seeing happening with Microsoft Flight Sim and X-Plane 12 instead of what Microsoft was already, grinding it out in the shadows, in the quiet, working on his major new sim. X-Plane 12 in the same way. They've been working on X-Plane 12, they said in the recent video, since before Vulkan. And they've been quiet about it, but still they've been working on making it better. And I'm like, is P3D the same way? Or have they been silently working on a new version that's supposed to be epically new? Or are they going to try to throw something together and respond to the market going in another direction? So I don't know. That's just my thought on it.
Yeah. I think one of the big concerns, obviously, with people using P3D is if they come out with something groundbreaking new in forms of visuals, the graphics engine or so on, will my add-ons that I've purchased for lots of money, will they still work? And that's really the issue with P3D. The moment they transform something in a bigger manner, that kills the add-ons. I don't know. It will have to be extremely good to convince people to keep investing or buying things for it. Yeah. And I think I just heard some sales quotes saying that P3D sales have kind of fallen off a cliff. That they are pretty much non-existent anymore at the moment.
Yeah, I would personally I would pay money to get my hands on the numbers for all the flights, like not the Navigraph numbers we've been seeing. I mean like the real numbers of like how things are going. I want to ask you a question. Because I don't know if a lot of people know this, but you have played a significant part behind the scenes in Flight Sim. Can you explain some of that, like some of the projects you've had your hand and expertise in?
Yeah. So I stumbled into these things really, and I did those videos for FSLabs. They didn't ask me to do those. I just did them out of fascination for the product, and I actually got contacted then by the developers and saying, hey, you know what, would you be interested in becoming a technical advisor for us? So not a beta tester per se, because they have beta testers. But they said, well, we're going to develop some new aircraft and with the sharklets, etc., and use a real world pilot. You could really be helpful in helping us to tweak those models and trying to get it as realistic as possible. And that got me into contact, obviously, with the developers there and the whole team. And it's a fascinating world to kind of dip your toes into. It's the buzz, and you start to realize how complicated certain things are in the background with development, the pressures that are there, right? Especially time pressure, and then financial pressure, and such, etc., etc. That's obviously something you don't normally realize as a flight simmer. But once you get to know these people, and be it at FSLabs or the Phoenix people, absolutely amazing people. They are such great characters, personalities, and that is something I will definitely treasure as well for the rest of my life. Having had the chance to actually help along, and and especially in the FSLabs, there's certain things that obviously have come from my side, and that's something I'm proud of, obviously. With the Phoenix, obviously, they have done this in extremely intelligent manner, in all aspects, be it getting the right people in, getting the right content creators in. They've done a fantastic job in that area, and it's still a long ways to go, I would say. They've still got a lot of work to do on that, but I actually am confident they will do so, and they continue to improve that product. Although I know, hearing from all users, there's very few people that are upset with the product. Most people are extremely happy with it. But yes, those obviously that have had high expectations will be a bit disappointed, because there are things still not correctly simulated, or there are bugs in there which they shouldn't be in. But yeah, again, that's an area, having been able to help out in some of these. But I would say that I had more influence in the FSLabs development team than compared to the Phoenix team.
That is so cool. I want to say thank you for people like you, because getting your hands, I mean, well, maybe not your hands, but your expertise into these projects, because I know there's a lot of projects who say they get input from pilots, but they don't really. So I love when they actually really.
There's no way a pilot was involved in this project.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No pilot was hurt.
No pilot was contacted in the making of this project.
I know.
No, but seriously, thank you for doing that, and as well, and I like to say this to any pilot who's a content creator as well, is thank you for bringing your profession and your expertise into our community, because like you said earlier, it's actually more fun to us in another level of immersion to be able to do it like you do it on your day-to-day job. That's all we want to do, is be able to do it as realistic as possible, and that's including adding a few extra steps in the checklist, or doing this or that, doing that, or knowing the correct order to do this or that. It's really cool to know and hearing that from real-world pilots that do flight simulators.
Absolutely.
It's been my pleasure. On the other side, I can say that I've said it on my streams as well. For me, trying to see it through my eyes. So ever since 9/11 and the follow-up on that, the cockpit door has been closed and locked. All right.
Yep.
So nobody. I remember being a first officer, and the cockpit door was open all the time.
Really?
We've had people walk in on cruise flight on
Wow.
let's say flying to the Canaries or something. They would just be bored and walk into the flight deck. Say, "Oh, hello. Is the autopilot on?" Yeah, the autopilot's flying the aircraft. Yeah.
Wow.
So the standard kind of questions, but that was how I actually started off flying.
Wow.
And nowadays, the cockpit door just being completely locked. And I know there's so many people that are fascinated when it comes to aviation, but they have zero chance to actually see what you are doing. They can come in maybe after the flight and ask, a quick 1 or 2 questions, but they don't really see you do what you do. So now actually having these simulators and having a huge kind of number of people fascinated in this area, and then virtually, if you like, being able to open that cockpit door, letting them in, and having them take a seat on the observer seat, let's say, and actually have a chat with you and ask, what's this, and I love the interaction. That's actually what kept me going now for almost 6 years with the streaming. It's the interaction with the viewers. And the great questions I get from them. And I do like talking about these things. I can ramble on for hours and hours, and I have obviously lots of real world stories to talk about. Funny stories as well. So that's my side of the story on that. So it's been a pleasure, and for me a huge trip up to now.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I want to say in quick promotion. Link is already in the description and in the chat, guys. Check out
Yep.
BlackBox711 on YouTube. I have one more question. I know I've been asking a lot of questions, XP. I'm gonna let you.
No, go ahead.
I'm gonna
No,
give
no,
you
no,
your
no, go
turn.
ahead.
I have one question I saw in the chat that I really want to point out, because there's a few things in aviation that I like to touch on because they're not talked about enough. One of those was the whole life thing. The other thing is female pilots. Now, you're not a female, I believe, right? And so, in all your years of flying, how have you seen, how have female pilots been seen, and how have they grown in numbers and in maturity since your beginning of your career to now?
Yeah, great question as well. I know back then, just before I started I was in training. I remember that some video cassettes came out or films came out.
Cassette.
From well, is that you remember those, right? So, so
VHS.
a long time ago, right? And there was these documentaries on life as an airline pilot, etc. And I remember there was one film, and it was ta-da, and big thing, the first female pilots, right, finally being finished training. And actually, that there was 2 female pilots now in the company that I worked for back then. It's a huge deal, huge deal. And it has caught on. Obviously, now I would say we're about 5%, all right, of female to male pilots as a quote, which is still not a lot. It's a shame because obviously flying an aircraft these days doesn't require a lot of muscle power or anything like that. It requires a lot of other important aspects that, of course, women can do as well as men. Working with female co-pilots, I've never had the honor to work with a female captain. I've always had just female co-pilots, but they are incredibly professional. You would not really see a big difference in the work, the way they work, because it doesn't matter if you're male or female, you'll be trained the same way.
That's right.
Things are expected of you in the same way, and either you deliver or you fail, one of those things, right? So it's about communication, although communication, of course, maybe sometimes a little bit different when you're working with a female. But all in all, there's literally no difference. It's a certain level of professionalism and flying abilities. There is no difference. They fly the aircraft as well as the men do. So it's a shame that there aren't more women actually taking up the career, because these days there are, especially in Germany, with all the laws we have regarding for the family time, etc., part-time work, etc. There's enough options to actually as a woman as well to join an airline and have a great career.
Yeah, that was going to be my question or comment because Blue know the story, but one of the flight attendants I used to work with back in the day, I remember her sitting in the jump seat studying. And we were like, what are you studying for? She goes, I'm going to become a pilot.
Mm.
And there were some people who laughed at it, but she was serious. And fast forward to today, well, she went to the military, she was one of the first female captains to fly over like the North Pole or something.
Nice,
And then she's now with a major airline, 787 captain. in the
Yep.
States here, and so, but she wanted to do it from day one,
Mm.
that was her focus. Is it a interesting, you think, with women that they're just not interested in it, or they are, or there's other barriers, what you see? What do you think,
Mm.
why it's not more?
I guess it's still a certain kind of men-dominated domain in the flight decks. Maybe that's something that's putting them off. Also, I've heard stories in certain countries in Europe where you know females are being treated in a different manner or seen in the hierarchy differently. And to give an example, I've heard from a female captain flying with a co-pilot, a male co-pilot, that the ramp agent comes in the flight deck and just talks to the co-pilot,
Mm.
and
Hmm.
the captain says, "Excuse me, right, I'm the captain. I'll make the decisions here, right?" And he completely ignored her,
Wow.
right?
Wow.
Because of that, kind of upbringing, and so I don't know. It's sometimes I guess a bit difficult, but all in all, from a professional viewpoint, there's no difference.
Yeah, I'm gonna look up the statistics here in the U.S. and in Europe to see what the actual percentage are of female to male captains. I really want to know.
Hmm.
Because I got a granddaughter who might be interested in flying. She she sat in front of my sim and she loved it.
Oh yeah,
She didn't want to get up, so it's like,
yeah,
interesting. I didn't look it
yeah.
up.
So
Wow.
so I have two daughters, and I always thought that the older one actually would maybe pursue career as an airline pilot, but no, both of them never caught on. And even though I had them on a jump seat several times, no, they didn't want to pursue that career. So I'm all right with that. So, but yeah,
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 my
if you
kids
if
don't.
you ride in a
They don't
jump
care for
seat and
aviation.
it doesn't excite you, it's not for you.
yeah, yeah, that's what I thought. So
True.
It's not for
True,
you.
true, true. I've gone ahead and posted in my chat, guys, BlackBox711's YouTube channel. You have to subscribe to this gentleman here. You don't know what you're missing. As I said, I used to watch him before I started streaming and learned so much. And as you could tell from this conversation, his explanation of things, teaching you things is really, 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 really good. And he's a patient person. You're very patient, man. Wow. I see
thank you.
I see the questions you get in your chat sometimes. I'm like, how do you ignore, how do you gloss over those questions and keep going,
No,
Because,
no, no. It's a pleasure. It's I just see people from all kind of experience levels. So you have the ones being flying for 15, 20 years on flight sim, and then you have those, especially now with Microsoft Flight Sim, that just started out in flight simming, right? So I'm happy to answer all the questions there. So thank you so much also for the shout out.
Yeah. Do you ever
I,
get those questions in chat or somebody says, hey, you're not a real world pilot? Because you didn't do,
No,
do you get those?
I quite always have to kind of smile when somebody comes in, because I don't write in my stream titles real world pilot. I don't do that. So when someone comes in, are you a real world pilot? I was like, yeah, and it's I was wondering why you know so much about aircraft and flying, etc. But yeah, I don't see myself in any way special in that sense. It's just a passion, and those that share the same passion, that's fantastic. That's all really that keeps me going and motivates me.
yeah, I promise this is not a shot to anybody else who's not in this chat. This is not a shot, so no offense. But I thought that you were not a real world pilot unless you put it in your title.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I, I I don't feel the need to do so. I would say, if there's if there's a certain interest, but however, I have to admit that in Twitch or on Twitch, it's a lot easier to find channels. While if you're live streaming on YouTube, it's a lot more difficult. And it does help, obviously, if you put in certain things like real world pilot. If people look at these keywords, then yeah, your name will pop up, or your channel will pop up easier compared to Twitch. But that's just the way it is. But we talked about it as well. I have a huge community going back to the Twitch days, which have stuck with me, which I'm really, really grateful for. And and from time to time we have new people come in, and but again, I want to focus more on making actually just tutorial videos. Not so long. There's kind of shorter videos that kind of just pinpoint certain areas in these flight sims. Yeah, so that's the plan going forward.
I have two things. This is my last thing I'm gonna say, and I'm gonna go on mute the rest of the time. Great question in the chat that needs to be answered because it's a hot topic. How old is too old to pursue a pilot career? And number two, are you and XP the same age? That's all.
Oh, jeez.
That's all.
So people, age is something I get asked about often, and I have a young voice, but when I say that, I'm actually going up to 53 this year, because people say, hang on, you've been a pilot for 25 years or more. How old are you? And I'm actually going to be 53 this year, so I'm actually born in 69.
Oh.
So how old is too old to become a pilot? Well, it depends on the regulations in the country that you are trying to become a pilot in. I think here it's not so much a licensing thing. It's more about airline, having specific limits on age. I remember my airline used to have 30 or something beginning of training. And I think they've kind of increased that to 35 now or something like that.
Oh, okay. Not bad. Not bad at all. That's beyond me. I can't become a airline pilot anymore.
I'm still in it, guys. I'm still in it. I'm still in it.
Well, we'll see how the huge demand, especially in the US, that you guys have there. Maybe something will change. I remember that I just heard that I think it was United taking over a flight school in Goodyear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they do ab initio training now, I believe. So you don't have to have prior experience with flying. So you can see airlines changing their attitude in that regard. So who knows? Especially US, a lot of people may be getting the chance to join at a very young age and actually become airline pilots much quicker than what it used to be.
Yeah. I mean, I just think that having a streamlined process would be the best way to go instead of you having to go find your 1,500 hours wherever you can get it, and then hopefully get an interview with an airline, and then hopefully get hired on. Versus
because exactly. Because here in Europe, we've had that process for a long time now, and it's safe, right? We have a good statistic as well, safety statistic. Can I just go? There's one question. What are my thoughts on with airport airline staff going on strike? Sensitive topic, obviously. I've been on several strikes in my career, and I've never been happy to go on a strike. It always feels strange to let people down because they booked their holiday flight, etc. And I've always hated doing it. However, here in Europe, and especially Germany, it's just really the last resort. You can actually stand up to your employer. Otherwise, you will not be able to go anywhere. And here in Europe, with competition being so fierce, the wages have been going down on average over the last, let's say, 10, 15 years. So at my airline, at least the first officers now that I'm flying with, they start out at a much lower rate compared to what I started out back then when I started. So the trend has been negative. And the same goes for any kind of, be it flight attendants or ground staff. If I talk to our ramp agents or the fuelers, the baggage handlers, it's just, downward spiral. So at the moment, at least what I'm gathering is we've hit rock bottom here, at least in Europe. Staff are not going to work for that kind of contract anymore. So we're gonna see how it goes from here. But again, I don't like going on strike. I don't think anyone really likes to go on strike. But if that's the only message that an employer will accept, well then that's the way it has to be.
Wow. Last resort. Yep, it's tough, Geez, it's very tough. Wow. Guys, that's almost 2 hours.
Is it really? Wow. Okay. That's went so quickly.
I feel like we could double that easy.
We could easily double it.
But
you get 3 streamers together, we can go on forever. There's so many questions.
I tell you what, I have one suggestion, or one idea, because I'm obviously also a huge fan of V1 simulations. He does fantastic streams as well, and so I would love to have kind of a discussion with him at some point. Maybe about the future, his views on the future, regarding airline pilots in the US, and me with my views on in Europe. Maybe it would be interesting for the viewers as well to have
It's
a
done.
huge kind
Consider
Yeah,
it done.
done.
That's it. It's
discussion
done.
on that.
It's
Yeah,
done.
I'd love that.
Yes. Yes. Me and Blue will sit in the corner over here and just have you guys just. I would love that actually. That's
Yeah.
fantastic. That is a fantastic idea. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we'll just introduce you guys and let you talk.
It's true.
Well,
it is true. I love that. It's good.
Well, the thing is that you've got to stop us though. Once those old war stories come up, the things that we have gone through in our career. I could fill books, obviously. And one question I always get, what's the worst kind of failure you've had? And I'm like, failures? Well, yeah, knock on wood. I've not had any really kind of nail-biting technical failures. Luckily, I've had some interesting stuff, but the aircraft these days are really well made and really reliable. The things that I've gone through is more, weather-wise, and having to make really kind of, quick decisions and not knowing the exact outcome because the situations are so dynamic. Or, my first officer dropping his ballpoint pen into the electric compartment, that sort of stuff. Or a dog, pooing into the cargo hold, smelling so bad that the load is actually throwing up, etc. So these kind of stories I have, and I can fill books with that.
my God.
So yeah, you would have to stop us on those stories, that story time.
I love airline stories.
Yeah.
I really do.
I've had an ATC question here. They asked it earlier. It says, how do you feel flying on the US Vatsim as controllers have different procedures? So basically, you're saying, how's the difference between Europe and the US as far as air traffic control is concerned?
I know you guys love, being on Vatsim or Pilot or whatever network you're on. That's one of the things I've always found so fascinating in flight simming, because again, you have so many dedicated people doing the ATC part and really doing it so professionally. It's actually scary. So when I'm flying like in Frankfurt with, let's say, you've got the clearance delivery, you've got the ground control of the tower, the departure sector, en route sector. It's scary. It's literally real life procedures, and they're so good at it. So that's something it doesn't stop fascinate me. When it comes to US, yes, that's also a fantastic thing that. Yes, it's a bit of a workload to get through the procedures and look at the differences, but how cool is it? You have the possibility, the option to actually do that. You fly from, let's say, across the pond from the UK to US. So how cool is that to actually be able to do that and switch to the US procedures? Brilliant. I enjoy that. Really fantastic.
Wow. Yeah, because it's funny because I run into the problem where I fly in Europe, even across the pond, and you have the difference with the accents, and having to listen keenly to what they're saying, and the phraseology is different. Is it the same for you over here in the US when you fly over here, having to listen to a New York controller with his New York accent, and so
Absolutely.
forth?
Absolutely.
Jeez.
Isn't that so cool? The same, like I said, in Europe. So you fly from Germany, you have the guys with German accent. You go through Austria, you have the guys with the Austrian accent, and then you go to Italy. And I swear to God, I always wondered why the Italians always shout into their microphones. And it's the same on Vatsim. They do it exactly the same way, and it's just with that Italian accent, the same loudness. I'm like, it really cracks me up. It's so fantastic. It's just so immersive. Brilliant. That's fun. I always try to convince people into going on Vatsim or whatever network you want to choose. Yeah, it's so worth it.
Yeah, it raised the level. Even South America, I've heard. I'm talking in English, and these guys are having a conversation in Spanish. It's like, wait a minute, okay.
Yep.
But yeah, it is brilliant. And the Jamaicans too, with their Jamaican accents. I have to put that in there.
Yeah. So, or being Australia or whatever. It's a cool hobby.
It is
I
cool
love it.
stuff. So that answers your questions there, Roy. Thanks for asking that one, Roy.
Yeah.
Definitely. Wow. But Yeah, we can go on and on and on, man. What is your stream schedule like? You have a set schedule that you stream on your channel?
I wish I had. I think once I retire at some point, maybe I'll be able to do that. For now, it's just I always announce it on my Discord channel. Next one is tomorrow evening. So actually, today's Friday. No, Friday. So today in European time, German time. So Friday, 1700 UTC. I'll be doing another stream here.
Can you post a invite to your Discord in here so I can drop it in the stream just in case some of these guys want to jump on your Discord channel
Just
as well?
do that.
Yeah, we'll do that as well.
Yeah, drop it on our Discord group chat.
We can post it up here.
But yeah, guys, if you're just joining in to the live stream, we've discussed a lot. We're listening to BlackBox711, real world Airbus captain, also flew the 747, 737, and just some great stories so far we talked about. I mean, there's so much to go through. You could obviously watch back this entire live stream on me or XP's channel on YouTube, or it will also be fully available on Spotify, iTunes, and anywhere else podcasts are listened to. So this is definitely one that I really enjoyed, man. It's been, I've learned so much. It's I always say this, like, the cool thing is getting to sit here and talk to you is it's kind of like if the door was open, like you said earlier, in the cockpit, and you're like, hey, I just want to go ask him some questions and just talk, because I love aviation. I want to be a pilot. Let me go ask this guy some questions. He's been doing this forever. Or if you just saw a person in a pilot uniform in the terminal, just sitting there waiting for a flight, and you want to go sit next to him, just have a conversation. Like, it's kind of what today felt like to me, and I thought it was just really informational, and I think a lot of people in the audience should probably feel the same way.
Yeah, I can just say thank you so much for the invitation. I said it to you prior to the stream. I love the way you do that. It's such a cool, laid-back atmosphere. Just have a lovely chat about this such emotional kind of hobby, right?
Yeah, it is.
So
yes, definitely.
Yeah. So thank you much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. BlackBox711, thank you so much. I'll be in the background watching your streams when I can. I've already joined your Discord here to know when you're going to be flying again. And also, you are on YouTube. Thank you so much for just sharing with us and giving us more insight into real-world aviation, is what we all want to do, but we can't. So thank you for that. That's why we had more real-world questions than we had simming questions.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys.
Absolutely. Blue, what you got coming up, man?
I gotta finish moving, man. I'm in the middle, moving to a new house. So I want to say big thank you to everybody on social media for congratulating us. It's a big deal. It's a big move. It's a milestone event in my life and in my wife's life. So this week, haven't been streaming. This is it for the week. But next week, I should have all my equipment moved into the new Blue HQ, and we should be streaming from there. So looking forward to that. What about you, XP? What you got going on?
I'm just gonna say, Black Box took the record now, 2 hours podcast, basically. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. I'll be back tomorrow with either the FNO or the XPO, one of the two. Nice. We're gonna be flying tomorrow sometime. We're just gonna do it. I'll let you guys know soon. But that's it, man. That's all we got. We'll be on for the weekend as usual. Thank you so much again, Black Box Blue Games. We shall see you guys on another Blu-XPerience. Stay tuned for big things, guys, because we have more guests coming on, and we have another special announcement coming on soon for that too. But
Very
anyway,
soon.
Go ahead, Blue.
Remember, you have 3 choices: give up, give in, and give it all you got. Peace, love, and God bless you. We will see you guys next time. Next video. That was episode 30, baby. Oh yeah, we out.
Night. Okay.